Will the Knicks start Karl-Anthony Towns and Mitchell Robinson when Mitch comes back? What should the Knicks ask for Christmas from old Santa Claus? And does OG Anunoby have a real case to be a defensive first teamer or potentially defensive player of the year? We're getting into it right now in our December mailbag.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right, welcome in to Locked On Knicks, and we wanted to let you know the college football playoff is here, and you don't want to miss a moment of the action. The college football playoff presented by Allstate begins with 4 first-round games December 20th and 21st on ESPN, ABC, TNT, and Max. And if you didn't know already, your favorite podcast now has a newsletter introducing the Locked On Knicks Daily Newsletter. One stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at lockedondaily.com. That's lockedondaily.com, and start your day with the all-new free Locked On Knicks newsletter. And, of course, we wanted to thank you guys for making Locked On Knicks part of your daily routine, whether you're checking us out on YouTube or on your podcast app of choice. If you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button or the notifications bell on YouTube and the auto download function on your favorite podcast app so you never miss an episode. I'm Alex Wolf. I'm editor-in-chief of Knicks site, The Strickland, which you can find at thestrick.land. And he's Gavin Schall, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster. And today we're answering your questions. So if you didn't see, we put out a solicitation on Twitter and also on YouTube community last night asking for mailbag questions. But if you're watching on YouTube now, feel free to just drop any questions you have in today's comment section too. If you want to ask us anything, we'd be happy to just answer questions the rest of the week up until the point that the Knicks hit the court again, because it's a long layoff and we like hearing from you guys. But let's get to our first question. This comes from Steve with a hang loose emoji at _Steven Jones on Twitter. And Steve wants to know, when Mitch is back, is it as simple as moving Cat to the 4 and putting Mitch at the 5? Gavin, I think we have an analogous situation to this, which is where Cat came from, right? And where Cat is about to visit later this week, his former home in Minnesota, where they played him with Rudy Gobert. And at first, I certainly didn't think it was going to work. And I think, if I remember correctly, we even discussed it on here. Like, we were both pretty skeptical about that move, and especially given the price and everything. And yet they managed to turn that team into a 1 seed in the West, or a high seed. So they didn't quite get the 1 seed last year, but they were number 1 team in the West for a large swath of last year and ended up a high seed in their conference and making a conference finals. So clearly it can work. The question would just be, can Mitch provide the same stuff that Rudy Gobert can?
Yeah, I think my main hesitation, and I think most people's main hesitation, I mean, in a broader sense, it's neutering the incredible impact Cat has had on the Knicks offense. I mean, he's just flat out having one of the better offensive seasons for a center we've seen in the last 5 years in the NBA, and it's not going to be the same with him playing power forward, right? Him and Jalen Brunson being the best pick and roll combo in basketball, that's sort of done with, right? When you have Mitch's guy just lingering right at the rim and saying, great, you beat the 2 guys you were on, guess right, I'm right here. And I don't have to move because this guy can't shoot from more than 2 feet away. In the last few years, he's not even been able to shoot that well from 2 feet away. So that is kind of the number one issue with the Knicks' overall identity. And then defensively, there are teams that can pick on it. And I think specifically of course, the Boston Celtics, where you're asking Karl-Anthony Towns to play in a whole lot of space. And like, I don't really know where you hide him. Do you put him on Jason Tatum or Jalen Brown and say, hey, buddy, like, go chase around 2 of the best scoring wings in the NBA? Oh, what? They're running pick and roll every single time, and you have to switch a screen or you have to fight over so they don't shoot a wide open 3. That's not good. And then I look back at last year's Celtics-Wolves games, and I think of Bill Simmons, my favorite Celtics fan, constantly talking about how Minnesota played them better than any team in the NBA. Last year, Minnesota won the first game. The Celtics beat them on November 24th by 2. The Celtics beat them on January 10th, but it took overtime. It was 127 to 120. So I think it would honestly be instructive and maybe at some point during these next few days, because the Knicks have a little break here, to go back and watch some of those games and look at what Minnesota did with Cat defensively. If they mix in some zone, like how did they protect him? Because clearly they could play with the Celtics, and that's what this is all about at the end of the day. Like I have no issue going with that lineup as a regular season group. I have no issue going with that lineup against the Cleveland Cavaliers, against the Philadelphia 76ers, probably honestly against the Milwaukee Bucks. It would make a lot of sense and work really well. Like it's really the Celtics when you think about teams that are just built to rip that lineup a new one. But you look at how Minnesota played with that group, and the starting lineup was Mike Conley, Anthony Edwards, Jaden McDaniels, Karl-Anthony Towns, or Jalen McDaniels, I think, Rudy Gobert. And the Knicks just have like a pretty decent facsimile defensively for each guy. Like OG Anunoby kind of does what McDaniels does. Mikal theoretically gives you a lot of what Edwards does on the defensive end of the floor. Like Brunson would be really well insulated. Like all the Knicks rebounding issues that have plagued them, like I think specifically that Atlanta game, would sort of be out the window. And they would be a dominant rebounding team. I mean, you're talking about putting three of the best rebounders at their respective positions and Mitch, Cat, and Hart on the floor. So there's a lot of reasons to do it. I think I just worry you lose what makes this team great. Might be worth it with how inconsistent they've been so far.
Yeah, I think the biggest trapping of this question would be assuming that that's the end all be all. If, if they make the starting lineup, Mitch at the 5 and Cat at the 4 eventually, assuming that that would be like, okay, well, that's it. That's the lineup that's going to play the most minutes. Like, I don't think that necessarily is the case. I think that maybe they make it matchup dependent. I know that that seems almost sacrilegious for Tibbs. Like, I can't see a world where he actually does it that way. What would probably be most realistic to happen would be that he'd maybe be more likely to pull Mitch after 5 minutes or something, against certain teams. And he would still want to see how it goes. But like, let's say you're playing the Celtics and then you start getting just absolutely destroyed from 3 in the first few minutes. He might pull Mitch, throw Josh Hart out there, go back to the, starting lineup classic version and, just kind of roll with that for most of the game. But I don't think that it would mean that, Mitch, even in a scenario where he's starting and maybe even closing games and, playing a decent amount of minutes, I don't know that he would play more than like 30 minutes this year anyway. I think they're still going to want to mix Precious in. I still think they're going to want to go with the smaller lineup that they've been starting, because I think Tibbs has come around on that as a lineup that works. And obviously, if he's a numbers guy now, which Tibbs always says, he's watching the numbers and, making a lot of his decisions based off of what groups are playing well together and stuff by the numbers. Like, there's no denying that this starting unit right now is playing really well together. They do have really good numbers together. And, the Cat and Brunson pick and roll with all that spacing, to your point, is, kind of irreplaceable. Like, you can't, if you start playing Mitch out there, that your entire team dynamic changes a bit. And I think that would be good in some cases. I think that some games that would be really useful, because they're, especially in games where, we've seen that when the Knicks go cold this year, it's really bad for them. Like, they just don't have that offensive rebounding to make up for their mistakes. So if both OG and Mikal are shooting bad, and then God forbid one of Brunson or Cat also aren't shooting super great in any given game, it can really hurt them and it can really make it an uphill climb. And, we've seen them lose a number of games like that. If you have a Mitch out there, suddenly you can start playing more like, the 2022 to 23 Knicks, or even last year's Knicks when Mitch was healthy, and Hartenstein did some of this too, where your offensive rebounding just makes up for any misses that you have. And you're able to still put out a top offense, even on nights where you shoot like 30% from 3. So I think that's more the thing for me, like, is just the versatility that it adds. And you can sort of see from the lineups that Minnesota played the most with Gobert and Cat out there, that they sort of mixed it up a little bit too. Like you mentioned, the starting lineup, but also, they moved in Alexander Walker for McDaniels at times, and that lineup was still almost 10 points better per 100 possessions than their opponents. There was even a lineup that they played for 208 possessions with Edwards at the 1 effectively, and then Alexander Walker and McDaniels at the 2 and 3, and then Towns and Gobert. I mean, the Knicks could throw something sort of similar to that out there if they decided to go with a sort of weird lineup when they're resting Brunson of Hart, OG, Mikal, and then Cat and Mitch potentially. I mean, that's a lineup that I struggle to think how any team could score on that lineup. And then if they could produce enough offense between, Hart and Mikal handling the ball, bringing it down the floor, and maybe getting it into Cat's hands quickly and letting him make quick decisions, like that's potentially a lineup that could work. Or you just even slot in Deuce for Edwards in that situation. That's still a unscorable lineup that could probably produce enough ball handling to make something happen on offense. And then lastly, they had Mike Conley, Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Is it Troy Brown? It's abbreviated. I forget.
Yeah,
I believe it's Troy Brown, Karl Towns and Rudy Gobert. And that lineup in 121 possessions was 32.1 points better per 100 possessions. So, I mean, there's a lot of different configurations where this could potentially work for the Knicks. I think it's just going to be a matter of finding the right defensive orientation to make it work, and probably just like what you were saying, where we could go back and watch some of those games. Like Tibbs should probably go back and watch all of those games from last year and start trying to figure out how to work Cat and Mitch together, much like Cat and Gobert finally ended up working, because I think that's sort of the key here to making this whole thing tick.
Yeah, watch it 4 or 5 times to hit that Tom Thibodeau standard. I think the last two things I'll note here is as much as I'm like, all right, well, we can't mess with the starting lineup, like the starting like top 3 offense in the NBA. They have a plus 6.2 net rating, right? Which is good. It is, I believe, lower than the Knicks overall net rating, or essentially right on board with it. It's played the most minutes of any 5-man lineup in the NBA. And it's not particularly close, 439 minutes so far. And you compare it to like the other best teams, best lineups. You can just look at the Celtics. The Celtics starters with Al Horford instead of KP, because KP just came back. There's something like plus 20 on the year, right? Like the Knicks don't have that profile like they did in January of last year when their 5 starters were out there. They were something like plus 20. I think they were something like plus 24, plus 25, right? And to win a championship, your number one lineup, I don't want to say has to hit that range explicitly, but by the end of the year should be in that neighborhood, right? It should have a double-digit positive net rating, like your best group that you can put out there. And the Knicks are not, they're, I guess, 60% of the way there. They're not particularly close to that right now. So that is something to continue to watch to see if that starting lineup gets better. But if it doesn't, like, what are you protecting at a certain point, right? And I get the idea that like that is where their highest ceiling is. That's where you have this all-time great offense. That's where you have a group that, hey, like probably shouldn't be Boston, but if they all get ridiculously hot, you could theoretically win that series. Like, I think at some point we just have to see that group be dominant in the regular season to buy into the idea that like the playoffs come and everything snaps together. I do think the one thing to note is the Knicks defense has traditionally taken a big leap relative to its regular season performance under Tom Thibodeau in the playoffs, last year's Pacers series being the lone exception because of all the injuries, while the offense generally bogs down. So having that group, you can survive the offense bogging down. And if the defense takes a leap, maybe they could be a little bit better. The one other thing I'll note is like the Knicks starters with Jericho Sims instead of Karl-Anthony Towns are plus 23 in terms of net rating. So 23 points better than the other team per 100 possessions, which means when they play like the traditional Knicks way, right, with like a rebounding and rim protecting big and the core of this group, they've been pretty dominant. Does that hold up the same way with Towns at power forward? Based on Minnesota, the defense would, and I have no reason to think the offense wouldn't be better with Mitch instead of Sims and Cat instead of Deuce. Like that's only seems additive. So I'd be interested to see it. I do think it's a lineup you have to really invest in the regular season, because I think it'll take time to, and it's just like it took Minnesota a year to fully get that chemistry down with Gobert. I think it'll take the Knicks a good amount of time to figure out the spacing, figure out how it works, like having Cat short roll instead of roll all the way to the rim. This is a whole episode worth of conversation, Alex. So I'll cut myself off, but I think it's really, really fascinating. Him and Achua have been good together as a 2-man group, plus 13 per 100 possessions. So there's a lot of reasons to think it could work. It could look good. And even against a team like Boston, as much as you're going to have difficulty guarding them, they would have a lot of difficulty keeping the Knicks off the offensive glass with that group. So it is something I want to see no matter what. And to your point, I think Mitch at this point in his career, probably more of a 20-minute-a-game guy than a 15-minute-a-game guy. We will be back. We're going to give gifts to each and every Knick. We'll talk about that in just a sec here on Locked On Knicks. But first, wanted to tell you about our good friends over at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, you live play-by-play, and so much more where you place your bets. I love the versatility of FanDuel because, as they said, you could build a parlay, you could jump in the middle of the game. As I've been telling you for weeks, Alex, you were bragging up on your Jets pick the other day. I got to keep bragging up on my Giants pick because, again, if you took the Giants under at halftime, you would have been in a great position to succeed as the Ravens just wrecked them. If you want to go with more of a live bet, I'm looking at the NBA Cup odds. The Oklahoma City Thunder are 5-point favorites, and I kind of think the Bucks pull off an upset. I think Giannis is going to go out there, drop 40 points. I think that game comes down to the last shot. So I would head over to FanDuel.com and make that bet. Or if you think I'm an idiot, bet against me. All you have to do is head to FanDuel.com, get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment worth FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, awesome. We are back here on Locked On Knicks, getting in the holiday spirit. Ed Holinsky with an American flag, what I believe is a Polish flag. I should have looked it up ahead of time, and a palm tree at Mr. Ed 315. He said, is Santa Claus a Knicks fan? What should the big guy in red give the Knicks? Alex, I would have argued that it's better that this was a Hanukkah question, so he could have given each of these guys eight gifts apiece, but I'll relent. What would Santa Claus give to each Knick?
Yeah, I mean, we can pretend that it's the first night of Hanukkah, or the eighth night of Hanukkah is where you get the best gift, right?
Yeah, usually. Yep. You build
so we can pretend it's the eighth night, it's fine. We'll be inclusive here. But if I was going purely on meme energy, I would say Theraguns for Hart, Mikal, and OG, because Tibbs is currently doing himself no favors in terms of his rep of playing guys too much. Mikal is leading the league at 38.3 minutes per game. Hart and OG are tied for 7th in the league at 36.8 minutes per game right now. So, and all those guys have played the whole season so far. So they're definitely logging some minutes. Definitely need those Theragons. Not a sponsor anymore, but maybe hit us back up and get us to hawk your product to the Knicks players. But if I wanted to take this a little more, let's say in the spirit of Wicked and the Wizard of Oz, take it more a Wizard of Oz direction and give these guys something that isn't necessarily something that you can put your hand on, but something that is less tangible and more theoretical. I would say for Mikal, first off, I think he's the guy that needs a gift first. He needs the gift of consistent aggression. Nothing says holidays like being angry. So I think that he needs a mean streak. He needs to be gifted his mean streak from Santa Claus. He needs just every single game to come out there and want to bulldoze his way inside, want to seal off smaller guys and get easy buckets, want to draw fouls, want to foul a guy every once in a while and make the other guy feel him. I think he's been a little too passive this year, and I think that a mean streak would benefit him greatly.
Yeah, I'm going to say a motor, maybe an angry motor to incorporate yours, but I just want to see that 21-22 version of him where he just was flying all over the court every second he was on the floor. Some of it is the style of defense he's being asked to play at the point of attack. Like, he can't do that as much, but I just think there's more of an impact to be had there. I want to see more rebounds, even higher steal rate. Like, just go out there and create some chaos, and I hope Tibbs enables him to do that. OG Anunoby, I'm going to gift him his early season 3-point shot, and I'm going to slip in an extra, and that is just like better rebounding. Like, I'm sure there's a better way to phrase that, but he's like a huge, strong, athletic dude, and the rebounding numbers are kind of consistently below average for him this season. Like, I wish he would crash the glass a little more. I think he could insulate the Knicks a little bit more against great offensive rebounding teams. And then, just his early season shot, because it's been a little cold of late.
I would agree. I don't think that I need to add anything to the OG category. I'm gonna move to Josh Hart. I would say I would gift him an implant or something. I don't know, something that would allow him to just loop these first 26 games for the rest of the season, including the playoffs, and let him continue shooting as great as he has, continue playing as good as he has. I think so far through these first 26 games, this has been, I don't think it's a hot take to say, even though, he's had better averages in various categories at different points in his career, I don't think it's a stretch to say that this has been the best year of his career by far. so far this year between the 40% 3-point shooting on decent volume, shooting 60% overall, being one of the best rim shooters in the game, averaging a career high in assists at 5.5, averaging nearly a career high in rebounds at 8.2. I mean, this has just been a phenomenal year for him so far. I would just say, the number one thing with Josh Hart has always been that consistency. So if he could just have something that would keep this going for the entire season with no lulls, no fall offs like we've seen from Mikal and OG, I think that would be the best thing possible for him.
I'm going to hire a hypnotist to tell him it's the playoffs every night, and then to hypnotize Tibbs to only play him 30 minutes, because if not, he would die probably. The one number with Josh Hart we noted in our defense episode, teams are shooting 5.5% better when he's on the floor. Still don't know. There's probably some noise in that because it just seems weird. It's such an outlier compared to everyone else on this team. And like the eye test, he looks really good defensively to me, but there are times I think where he just falls asleep a little, and he's been so good on offense. No questions there. So that is my one thing. Karl-Anthony Towns, what are you gifting him?
I don't know. It's tough because what do you give a guy who has everything, right? I think that he's been
rim protection.
Yeah, I guess rim protection. Like on offense, he's been amazing. Rebounding, he's been one of the best in the NBA. I think it would just be more of the rim protection, like what he's been showing lately, and I guess discipline. That would be my other thing. If I was going to go again, sort of Wizard of Oz with it, discipline. The ability to harness his emotional side in productive ways, but not in unproductive ways, because I think we've seen even just over the course of the last week where he was able to harness it negatively against the Hawks and, got himself fouled out of the game eventually. And, just all in all, his emotions sort of got the better of him, I feel like, versus against the Magic. I think that he harnessed it positively in some ways, maybe a little bit negatively too, where he got a little crazy with the flagrant foul against Mo Wagner. But in general, I think that he's able to harness his anger in a good way, much like a Sith Lord or something. I don't know. I guess I'm asking a lot of these players to just get anger for Christmas. I don't know if that's very in the holiday spirit, but I like when he harnesses his emotions in a productive way. So I would just hope that he has the discipline to only do it the productive way and not the unproductive way. That's my wish for him for Christmas.
Yeah, I'm getting him. I just had to Google the name of this, but an EMS machine, which is something that lets you do, if I'm getting this right, something like 20,000 setups in 15 minutes. It hurts, but I think literally the one thing he needs is greater core strength. I think it would improve his flexibility, like when he's in a back pedal defensively, when he's in a drop, in terms of just exploding up, right, and like being like a little quicker off his feet on defense, which is an area he really struggles. So that would improve his rim protection. And then on the offensive end, he is just constantly falling down after layups, and that is maybe my single biggest complaint about him, because the Knicks are always playing 5-on-4. Mo Wagner got a 3 off it the other day. He's gotten a little better with it, but it's been an ongoing issue. So whatever just biological advancement would allow him to stay on his feet after he sprints in and makes or misses a layup would be a game changer. Jalen Brunson, this is a little drastic, but limb extension surgery, unless he was a little taller, and I don't even know, being taller might mess up the beautiful kinetic bowling ball energy of his game. But that is really the one way I think his defense could improve, is his awareness is generally very good. Outside of that, I would gift him more teammates that could score the basketball and take a little bit off his table. I guess that's kind of the answer. I'm going to say a coach who's willing to spread the love a little bit more. He's number 1 in the NBA in ball dominance percentage, basically just the amount of time he has the ball. I would gift him some help, I think, at the end of the day.
And you know what? He might be getting that. So I think that his Christmas list will probably bear fruit, because I think he's going to be gifted another shooter soon. If Landry Shamet does well in Westchester, he just made his return and should hopefully be back to the Knicks soon. We might have an episode on that coming up soon. But yeah, I think definitely some help, and just overall, I would hope that he would still have that same, just gift him that same feeling and drive of, maybe 7 or 8 games ago, where he was playing like Chris Paul to get his teammates involved. And, obviously some of that comes with, OG needs his early season 3-point shot, and Mikal needs the aggressiveness and everything else. And, Hart needs to continue being a 40% 3-point shooter. A lot of this still needs to happen for, Brunson to be able to keep playing like that. Because if the guys are missing shots, and it unfortunately falls on Brunson. So some of it is just more shooting and more from his teammates. But I hope that he never loses sight of the fact of what this team could be if everybody is clicking on every cylinder. But speaking of guys clicking on every cylinder, you can say whatever you want about his offense, but OG Anunoby has had a phenomenal defensive year so far. So in a moment, we're going to break down his case to potentially make all defensive first team, all defensive second team, or potentially defensive player of the year, most improved player of the year. Lots of different things that we were asked about in our final mailbag question for this episode in just a second.
But first, we want to tell you about our friends over at Robinhood. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for high society. Now, the resourceful individual of Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.25% APY on uninvested cash and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on IRA account contributions. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For product-specific disclosures, visit robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rate may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC.
And today's show is also brought to you by our friends at Rocket Money. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? That definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. And even just beyond subscription tracker, one of my favorite things with Rocket Money is they will renegotiate your subscriptions for you, which is great. If you've ever had to live in a market like I do, which many of you probably deal with this too, where cable companies and internet providers have sort of a monopoly and it's really hard to get a lower rate. Rocket Money will go to bat for you and make those calls on your behalf for a pretty nominal fee, if I do say so myself, and saves you the time of having to sit on hold with all these companies and renegotiate your contract, which is pretty great. So cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. All right, Gavin, we're back to answer our final question for this mailbag episode. But again, I'll just remind anybody, if you've got anything that you're thinking of while you're listening to this or whatever, feel free to look up the tweet that we sent on Twitter. It's like right at the top of our page still. Or if you're on YouTube right now, just drop it in the comments for this episode. We'd love to hear from you guys and hear what you want us to address for the rest of the week, because it's quite frankly, it's a light week this week because the Knicks aren't playing for most of it. So we love hearing from you guys. But our last question that we got for today was from Adrian Chatham on Twitter at MagicAge683. Adrian wants to know, don't want to jinx it, but what do you guys think about OG's season thus far? All defensive first team, second team, most improved player. He has definitely shown more on both sides of the ball. And I think because of Cat and Jalen, the national media is not on him as much. Gavin, I started looking and just to see, start at the beginning here with all defensive first team, and last year it was definitely dominated by bigs. So it was Wembanyama, Gobert, AD, Bam, and then Herb Jones was the lone wing in that group. And then second team was all wings. So, I mean, that's sort of where those guys landed last year. Alex Caruso, Drew Holiday, Jaden McDaniels, Jalen Suggs, and Derek White. I have no doubt that OG probably would have found himself on that list in the second team if not for the games played restrictions and the fact that he had to miss so much time down the stretch. But this year, it's looking pretty competitive in the wing field with some new guys kind of finding their way into the conversation. And a lot of the bigs are still doing really well as well. So I think maybe OG has even more of an uphill battle this year than he did last year.
Yeah, I think it's going to be tough. And I want to qualify this with I watch a lot of other teams. I don't think I watch enough to say this without any bias, because this is the award that more than anything else is a test of how much you lock in. Like I think it's only been in the last like few years I've gotten good at like gauging how the Knicks do individually defensively. Each game you watch another team casually, it is really, really hard to isolate individual defensive impact unless you're pausing, unless you're rewinding. So tough thing to gauge. But if I'm going to put on my orange and blue glasses and say, yeah, you know what, OG should be on there, I think the first team so far would look something like Jalen Suggs, Dyson Daniels, Wemby, and Rudy Gobert. I think Dyson and Wemby, and I think you have the same too, are like the absolute locks. Like they're on this team, no doubt so far. Anthony Davis probably should be on there. The Lakers have sucked defensively. He's kind of been the one shining light and the one thing that's sort of made it all work. The Heat have fallen off a tiny bit, so that's where you could justify Bam not being back. Herb has dealt with some injuries. Minnesota got off to a little bit of a slow start defensively. If you want to say, hey, they don't deserve two guys with Jaden McDaniels. I think the best thing he has in his favor is with Oklahoma City. You could literally make a case for pretty much everyone in their rotation. Like Chet, when he was healthy, 100% would have made first team, but he's just missed so many games. Hartenstein has missed half the year. He would be someone who would have a great case for first team. Shea's leading the NBA in steals per game. Jalen Williams has been ridiculous in that end of the floor. All three of their guards, Dort, Caruso, Case, and Wallace, are great. Same with the Rockets, like Amen Thompson, like per minute might be the best defender in basketball, at least the best wing defender in basketball. Tari Eason is amazing, but again, those guys play less than 30 minutes. So I know that's not talking about OG a lot. I'm just sort of driving home why it's really, really hard, despite the fact that I think he's been incredible on defense this year, to say without a doubt that he's first team all defense when the Knicks just haven't been elite on that end of the floor.
Yeah, I mean, it ultimately is going to come down to too, like, if if last year is any indication, positionless is going to mean a lot of bigs in that first team. So
Yeah.
to break through is going to be hard. And I think there's a real case to make that Dyson Daniels probably has the better case to be that breakthrough guy this year. I mean,
100%.
I think all defense is a little different than defensive player of the year. I don't think that they require you to be on an elite team. Like, I think for defensive player of the year, there has to be like generally like that's why like Wembanyama didn't win it last year, despite putting up like 5 stocks a game, because he was on a crap team, so like they're not going to give you defensive player of the year for that. Maybe that works in OG's favor if the Knicks really like turn it up down the stretch and end up like the 1 or 2 seed in the East somehow, like something like that, which right now it seems like they're probably cruising for the 3 or 4 seed, just based off of Cleveland's insane start, which is going to be hard to overtake them eventually. And then Boston being Boston, like seems like 3 or 4 seed is probably in their view right now. But if they go on a super heater, I think that would help him, because that helps in the defensive player of the year voting. With the all defense teams, I think that they focus more on just impact numbers to a degree, and then individual achievements regardless of team achievements, because like the Pels weren't really anything to write home about last year, and Herb Jones managed to break through into that first team. Obviously the Lakers were a low seed in the playoffs. Like the Spurs didn't even make the playoffs, or were a lottery team. So that's where like just individual success can work for you, but also it can work against you if you're OG, where you're on a good team, but you're maybe not putting up the eye-popping numbers that some of these other guys are. I feel like that's where someone like Dyson Daniels would jump in, because like as good as OG's been this year, like you could argue he's been as good as Herb Jones was last year. Like Herb last year had 2.2 stocks per game and a plus 10.5 on off. OG this year is at 2.7 stocks, which is great for normal people, but there's just some freakish stock numbers flying around this year, and a plus 7.3 on off. Dyson Daniels right now is at 3.9 stocks per game as a wing. So that's like almost 50% better than OG right now, which is crazy. And 3 of those are steals. I mean, he's averaging 3 steals a game. We just saw firsthand how dominant he's been just from the eye test as well against some of the best perimeter players in the game. And then Wemby is at 4.6 stocks and a plus 11.6 on off, and a team that's actually been competitive this year. So I think it's going to be a real uphill battle for OG to potentially go for DPOY, because I think that Wemby probably has that in a stranglehold right now with the stock numbers and the fact that his team has gotten better and they're so much better with him on the floor. But also just even in the wing category, I think there are just guys that are better in terms of being defensive player of the year and probably first team as well. But if OG plays all the rest of the games, or at least hits the, I'm going to be realistic and say he'll probably miss some games at some point. Although so far he's been great. I mean, he hasn't really looked like,
hasn't missed one, right?
yeah, he hasn't had one scare even this year so far, which is awesome. And there's certainly been moments where I've seen him hit the deck and I've been like, oh no, please, no, not now. But he's been good. So if he plays the required game threshold, I don't think there's any way he gets left off the second team. I just think his climb towards the first team is a pretty steep one, and especially towards defensive player of the year. I realized we didn't really bring up the most improved player thing either. I don't know that his offensive improvement, to anyone that's not like a Knicks fan watching him every day, has been enough to really justify that sort of an accolade. I feel like that's usually a who improves their scoring average the most award. And I mean, going from 14.1 points to 17 points when he's averaged around 15 to 17 every year since 2021 to 22. And the 3-point shooting is actually, thanks to his recent slump, gone down compared to in past years. I just don't know that he's doing enough on that end that he would get most improved. Even if to our eyes he looks a lot better, I don't think to a national audience that would pass the sniff test. And someone else who jumped, had like a real big leap. I mean, even if you look back at the Hawks again, someone like a Jalen Johnson or something like that, who's gone from, good enough player to near all-star level this year. I think someone that, or even Dyson Daniels, who we were just talking about, who's had a huge leap this year, like someone like that, I think has way more of a case for most improved. So I don't know that OG will even sniff that award or be top 10 even for that one, unfortunately.
Yeah, I don't think he deserves it right now, to be fair. Like you said it over his like early season OG. If that kept up, we would be having that conversation. Last 10 games, just 29% from three after opening the season, shooting 44% from distance. And just like, I just need to see the consistency offensively for him. Like on nights where his shot has been falling, like early in the year, like was constantly like getting into his mid-range bag and was using that little push off and getting open 10-footers and nailing them, or just like pinning guards under the rim, like whenever you got a mismatch. And teams have been, I think, very conscientious about like cross matching and transition. If he's guarding a point guard on the other end, making sure their point guard isn't guarding him on the other end. He hasn't been dunking nearly as much. Like earlier in the year, he was, I referenced his stat a lot. He was top 10 in the NBA in dunks. I don't have the number pulled up, but I can tell you he's fallen off a little bit in that category. I think he's worn out because the Knicks are asking him to basically plug holes everywhere defensively every single night. Maybe not quite used to putting out this effort over every single game because he normally would have missed some time from now. I'm hoping these 5 days off, we kind of see early season OG. Thursday against the Timberwolves, we'll be there for that one. Again, as Alex said, if you have more mailbag questions, comment on the tweet, YouTube, and our DMs. We are taking them all week. Happy to answer anything you guys want answered. But until next time, he's Alex. I am Gavin Schall. We will talk to you very, very soon on Locked On Knicks.